On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, everybody? Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is another Locked On NFL Sunday. Myself, Ross Jackson, with my good friend, Cody Roark. I'm the host of Locked On Saints. Cody's the host of Locked On Broncos. You can catch us every single Monday through Friday covering our teams, but you can only catch us live in video, right? Seeing the faces, connecting the dots on Sunday mornings here at 11 a.m. Eastern time ahead of the weekend of the NFL weekend, man. And Cody, as always, glad to be here with you, buddy. How you holding up?
Good to be back. You know, one thing I think you mentioned, you touched on it too in that little introduction there, is that I think fans and listeners, they love putting faces to the voices, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's always a great thing. And with the Locked On Podcast Network and the Locked On NFL channel, for example, we're here, Locked On NFL Sunday, Week 7. We got an awesome slate of games and a lot of matchups we're going to preview with some of the local experts covering the biggest stories with their teams involved. And you can only get that here, the Locked On NFL channel, folks.
Absolutely. And of course, if you have a favorite team, you have a favorite league, whatever it is, not even just the NFL, we cover MLB, we cover the NBA, we cover, sooner or later, we're going to get into lacrosse, I promise you. But we've got everything covered here over on the Locked On Podcast Network. So if you got a favorite team, a favorite league, go ahead and check us out. We appreciate you being here with us this morning. As always, if you want to drop us anything in the chat, you have any questions, anything you want to say, you want to shout out your team, you want to shout out your host, whatever, go ahead and hit us up in the chat, whatever platform you're on. We'll be able to throw it up here on the screen and get you a little shout out, everything as we go through. We have a nice show today. We're going to be joined by Jake Lisco to talk the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow, what offensive line, all that good stuff. We'll also talk to We'll also talk to Gino Camilleri about the Eagles and their win on Thursday night. And then we've also got Aaron Freeman coming in to talk Falcons as well. But before we get started with all of that, a couple little things that Cody and I always like to hit on before we get started with our guests, just to make sure everybody's getting the most up-to-date information. We saw a little bit of a change in schedule this week just to protect, but it seems like everything is fine. The big concerning places so far this week were New Orleans and then Las Vegas. All negative tests this morning, so those games are set to start. They did rearrange the schedule a little bit, putting Las Vegas and Tampa Bay early to make sure that Sunday night game was going to happen. And so now we get a really nice Sunday night game still in Seattle at Arizona.
Yeah, we get to see the Seahawks coming off of a bye week. We get to see the Arizona Cardinals coming off of a big-time win over the Dallas Cowboys. And look, the NFC East this year has been one of the most brutal divisions to watch. All circumstances considered, injuries, but it's just not been the most competitive division overall, which it used to be. And that was even something they touched on one of the broadcasts on Thursday Night Football when the Giants and the Eagles played. And the Eagles came out on top, and the Giants actually had a little bit of control with 4 minutes left in that game, but it sputtered down. That's just the NFC East right there, as it is. But also that too, Ross. We got some other storylines. Business is booming in Tampa Bay now because Antonio Brown has now been signed to a contract with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Really a big pull by Tom Brady because Tom Brady and Russell Wilson were two key players advocating that he needs to be on a team. And it was really between those two teams, he goes and plays with Tom Brady. So now they looked really good against Green Bay last week, and now they look even stronger with the addition of Antonio Brown. And ideally, on paper, if we think of Antonio Brown, how he produced, yes, it's scary. But not being involved with football for as long as he has, that could play a little bit of a role into it, but he's been working out. He's been getting in these throw sessions with Russell Wilson in the offseason. So really, he served his 8-game suspension. Now it's all open from here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now he's got this point to where he'll be able to return after the Week 8 game. And so, of course, for me, that means that Tampa Bay would then be adding Antonio Brown to their lineup as they take on the New Orleans Saints Week 9 in Tampa Bay. So certainly some fireworks there that will take place, but looking forward to seeing the way that he's going to be able to rebound and what that's going to look like and see if he's going to be able to do it. I mean, I don't think that any of us have the most positive memories of Antonio Brown at this point because we tend to think about him and his off-field antics, which I think is legitimate, right? It's legitimate to be concerned about that, but we'll see. We'll see exactly what kind of work he's been able to put in since he's been gone and what he's going to be able to put together. I think Kelly Clarkson would be pretty proud of my since you've been gone reference there. But we'll see what he's going to be able to bring back to the football field once he gets there.
Yeah, I think anytime you add a talent, if he could come back and play, at the level of talent that I think we all know Antonio Brown can be,
Hmm.
phenomenal football player, the off the field stuff, the questionable character, the concerns you have there, those are things that organizations tend to think of. And if you go back and you reference Bruce Arians said back in March, he's not a good fit. All of a sudden, now
Right.
he is a good fit. And part of me is trying to think, okay, what changed from March till now? Well, I think injuries have been a big thing, especially at the
Hmm.
wide receiver position. Mike Evans with the ankle, week in and week out. Chris Godwin with the hamstring injury,
Right.
week in and week out. They need some help there. And Antonio Brown, I mean, you add him with Scotty Miller, and they're loaded. And
Right.
they seem to be playing really good football right now. Now, the first quarter of that Tampa Bay and Green Bay game last week, Aaron Rodgers, the Pack, they were rolling. And all of a
Right.
sudden, here comes Tom Brady. After the little Hingle McCringleberry touchdown celebration that Aaron Rodgers did. He did one pump, though. He didn't do
He
three.
didn't do
Did one
three. He
pump.
didn't do
So
three. He didn't
it was
deserve
around 15
yeah.
yards on the play. But after that, it went downhill, became the meme of how it started versus how
Right.
it ended.
Yeah.
And look, Tampa Bay, they're very strong. And obviously in that division, as you talked about, too, they're kind of playing really good football. But Ross, let's talk about some of these games that we have Sunday in the late afternoon stretch. They
Mhm.
feature some really good matchups, some divisional matchups. Let's roll it.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got some really good things going on for this late afternoon. I mean, we're going to be looking at the Tampa Bay versus Las Vegas game that we were just talking about, but we also get Kansas City traveling to Mile High to take on your Denver Broncos. Tell us a little bit about that matchup and what you're expecting at this point in the season and what the Broncos are looking like here.
Well, there's snow, right? And the last time
Right.
these two teams played, there was snow in Kansas City in a blizzard game. This time the Broncos, they're fortunate enough, they're nice enough to put the tarp on the field. The Kansas City do last year. But I think the biggest storyline in this game, look, the Broncos have lost the last 9 matchups against Kansas City. Kansas City, they're going to be without Mitchell Schwartz. They're going to be without Alex Okafor, Taco
Right.
Charlton, and they're also going to be without Sammy Watkins. So if the Broncos wanted to take advantage of any moment to be able to try to attack the Chiefs, today would be the day to do it.
Mhm.
Coming off of a big victory over the New England Patriots, 18-12. The Broncos got into the red zone so many times. There were 3 or 4 drop passes that could have been touchdowns last week. And the Broncos, they want to go back and they looked at the film like, we missed out on so many opportunities. They could have really made a statement last week against New England, but
Mhm.
they kicked field goals. Brandon
Right.
McManus, 6 for 6. I mean, that's the offense right there. And they just extended him early on in the season. So obviously that's proven to pay off there. But the Broncos defense has been playing really good football. That front 7, the defensive line is really good. However, the key coming into today's matchup, the Broncos, they're not going to be able to send the pressure they've been sending at the New York Jets or the New England Patriots at the Kansas City Chiefs, because they go 3 by 1. They'll go empty. They'll go spread. You can't do that because Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the National Football League when it comes to throwing against the blitz, identifying guys. And look, he's got a new weapon they're debuting today in Le'Veon Bell. How much is he going to play? Well, that's going to be up in the air right now, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still running back 1 for them. You still have Tyreek Hill. You have Robinson, and you also have McCole Hardman and Travis Kelce. The Chiefs are loaded offensively. For the Broncos, they're going to have to come to this game. They can't make the same mistakes they made last week. They can't turn the football over. You can't do it against Kansas City. And you can't just chuck the football because Drew Lock, they took 9 shots downfield past 20 yards. And the ball, if you fall incomplete, guess what? The clock stops. And then you give more time for Patrick Mahomes to be able to do what he does. Broncos got to come into this game. They get Melvin Gordon and Phillip Lindsay back. Noah Fant's back today for the Broncos as well. KJ Hamler at wide receiver. Offensively, they're getting guys back now. The biggest question mark, Ross, for this game, Dalton Risner, left guard, left the game last week against New England with the shoulder injury. Wednesday and Thursday did not participate in practice and was limited on Friday. His status for today is in question.
Yeah, that's going to be a big piece for them because you can get all the offensive pieces that you want, but as we've seen across the league, if you don't have the offensive line put together, it don't matter. It does not matter. But speaking of those New England Patriots that they beat last week, they'll be hosting the San Francisco 49ers. They're favored right now, -3 at home in Foxborough. Another team that's getting healthier and healthier over on the offensive side in particular is San Francisco. The defense still a little banged up, of course, because they're missing players for the full season or for extended periods. But that offense is starting to put its pieces back together. And we got to see a little glimpse of that last week.
Yeah, we did. And to be honest with you, the Sunday night football game between them and the Los Angeles Rams, it was one of those games where I don't think anybody expected the 49ers to win based on how they've been playing and how Jimmy Garoppolo looked the week prior against the Miami Dolphins. But the biggest thing that I looked at in that matchup was that Jimmy Garoppolo finally started to get into a bit of a rhythm. Raheem Mostert, the running game was going strong. Deebo Samuel was back for them as well. And then all of a sudden, you lose Mostert. Now he's going to be out at the running back position for a little bit of time there. And so they're getting some guys back. They're trying to work out the formula here, but it's really tough to say against New England. I mean, New England's they were able to practice this week. They didn't get much practice leading up to the Denver Broncos matchup. So ideally, they're going to have to try to counteract that rushing attack between Cam Newton, James White, Damian Harris, and also Rex Burkhead. They're going to have all these different options to be able to work and match with, but it's going to be an interesting matchup for sure. And I don't know quite which way where I'm leaning, but if San Francisco plays the way that they played last week against the Rams of all people, whose defense is very damn good, especially with Aaron Donald, look, I think they have a chance to beat New England. Once again, we could see New England drop 2 in a row.
Yeah. We have starting to raise some question marks about what's going on in Foxborough right now. So I don't think I blame you. We have another game in the late afternoon slot. Jacksonville going to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. But before we get to that game, we'll come back to it around the end of the episode today. We want to get our first guest in. It is a great pleasure to welcome in our good friend Jake Lisco of the Locked on Bengals podcast. You can follow him on Twitter at Jake_NFL. Jake, thanks very much for joining us, man. How you holding up this morning?
Good morning. That's all I got for you. Good morning.
Well, we appreciate you being here. For both of us, it's an early morning to make the show, but we love us some football. And you once told me on Twitter that you would show up anytime, any place to talk about Joe Burrow. So here's our chance to finally get to do it on the record. Joe Burrow. Let's start off with him. He's, of course, probably the biggest news in Cincinnati right now outside of some other points that we'll hit. But tell me a little bit about how Joe Burrow is performing. I know that there are some ancillary factors, of course, but just coming down to Joe, how is he performing for you guys? And how do you feel about the Bengals investing that number 1 overall pick on him and the return you're getting?
I think immediately Bengals fans thought this is the correct guy for the number 1 pick. And then some people maybe saw Justin Herbert come along and were like, ooh, I like that Justin guy. I like his arm. And I'm not necessarily one of those people. And I also don't think you need to compare them to indicate that Joe Burrow is the right pick for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a PFF's top graded quarterback on throws to the intermediate part of the field, which is pretty impressive for a rookie, even if the rest of his game isn't necessarily incredible. He certainly struggled with the Baltimore Ravens, Don Wink Martindale's blitz packages, the disguise stuff. The Bengals couldn't get on the same page in terms of protection rules. Too many rushers and the A and B gaps coming free. But overall, outside of the deep ball, which is something that he was very good at LSU, which hasn't translated to the NFL yet, he's like 2 of 24 or something like that on those passes. He's been everything that you could want. I think that if you're going to nitpick, which I guess you could, I don't know why you would, you could talk about arm strength being a potential concern. But I mean, even me saying that, those people that listen to me on a daily basis are going to be like, Jake, stop talking about the arm strength, man. And he's good enough. He's got all the tools. He certainly has a mental game you need to succeed in the NFL. The processing speed generally very good. The vision showing up the way that it did at LSU, and Bengals fans very happy with Burrow. And the other thing that's significant for Cincinnati is that he's the biggest star that they've had since Chad Ochocinco. They haven't had that kind of star power in Cincinnati for like a decade, it feels like at this point.
That's a great point.
Well, look at Burrow in the season. Like I said, I think when I watch film on the Bengals, you see the flashes with Burrow, and you factor in the surrounding talent around him. And the biggest question, I don't even think it's a question. I think it's the most notable thing that we notice when we watch the Bengals. Offensive line needs some help in order to keep Joe Burrow upright. Joe Burrow, as you mentioned, he's sharp, he's cerebral, he's got the mental toughness to be able to take some of those shots. But after a while, you don't want your overall number 1 pick to be taking as many hits as he's been taking from opposing defenses. Sometimes he's also got to learn to balance between throwing the ball away. But outside of that, we've seen that toughness translate to it. Now, the biggest question I have coming into the Bengals matchup against the Browns today, well, now they're going to be without Joe Mixon potentially. The offensive line is struggling. What are your thoughts on really what the Bengals have to do today in the rematch in the Battle of Ohio Part 2?
I thought the Bengals offensive line actually played really well against the Colts, which I'm not going to say lightly because they haven't been very good this season, but the left tackle Jonah Williams in his first year, he missed, of course, his rookie year with shoulder injury recovery. He's been pretty good, I think, in his first year. So that's been pleasing. But I mean, to say that the guard play is anything less or more than the worst guard play on any NFL roster is probably generous at this point. And so if I'm the Bengals, with Kevin Zeitler's name on the trade market or emerging in trade rumors this week, I'm looking at bringing him back to Cincinnati. And I know that he'd probably be open to it. I mean, he started his career in Cincinnati. I think that they still have ties here or there. I'm not in Cincinnati, of course, but I'd be looking for a way to try to improve the guard position. And there are players on the team that are currently unhappy that you could look at trying to package in a trade. Now, I don't know if the Giants are looking to acquire any of those assets, but if you're going to spend assets to acquire a guard, you could then recover some of those assets by trading some of the players that aren't necessarily part of your future, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. But absolutely a good point about the offensive line, Cody. And the concern is that, do his habits start to break down? Does he start to develop the tendency to drop his eyes in the pocket, which we saw a little bit actually against the Colts. And it's something that I'm watching very closely going forward. Just 1 week after he took probably, and I'm not saying definitively, but one of the bigger beatings he's taken in any football game in his life. He a few times bailed a clean pocket, dropped his eyes a little bit, or looked to scramble when he actually had some time, and there could have been some downfield throws that he could have taken. So something I'm watching going forward with his development, and definitely my biggest concern with this coaching staff and this offensive line is, how does it affect Joe Burrow going forward?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Jake, let me switch over to the defensive side. We talk a lot about Joe Burrow, quarterback of the offense. I look at a guy like Jesse Bates, who PFF has released this morning is their top graded safety right now. And, whatever stock people put in PFF grades and everything, it's still a mechanism to sort of look at the success of a player. What can you tell us about Jesse Bates and how he affects that Cincinnati Bengals defense?
I mean, he's been a true all-star level center fielder this year. And obviously I watch the Bengals more than I watch other teams, but he's playing with extreme confidence. His instincts have shown to be great. I mean, the pass breakup numbers that PFF has, I find that my own observation agrees with for Bates. I find that, if he can get to a ball, he's timing it up very well. The only hole in Jesse Bates's game is that he's a true free safety. And when he's the guy that's the alley player against the run, when your front seven has failed you, it doesn't always go well when he's coming down from the safety position. And it went particularly poorly the last time the Bengals played the Browns with Nick Chubb, who's very hard to tackle. So Nick Chubb not playing this week. We'll see if Jesse Bates gets a little bit of that, vengeance game, because really the only game that he's done anything less than Pro Bowl / all pro level was the first time the Bengals played the Browns this year in week 2. And he's been everything you could want from a free safety, which is honestly very important for Lou Anarumo, whose defense may or may not be mutinying today with Carlos Dunlap, of course, posting the depth chart with his demotion to 3rd in the edge rusher rotation after he was amazing in the second half of the season. Some of the best play we've seen from Carlos Dunlap in his career, if not the best play we've seen from Carlos Dunlap in his career. And so, that on top of reports that Geno Atkins is unhappy, and very hard to know from the outside right now. But I mean, Mike Garafolo saying that, Dunlap is in trade talks. I think Ian Rappaport saying that he's in active trade talks. So Jesse Bates, great glimmer for Lou Anarumo's future, that somebody has had a huge bounce back season and is playing very well. I think the Bengals need to prioritize extending him after his 3rd year this offseason, but questions abound outside of that position on this Bengals defense, especially without Trey Waynes, who's been lost for the pec injury, and today William Jackson not playing. So you're down your top 2 corners, and the only team that Baker Mayfield's really looked good against this year is you, Lou. So how are you going to do today?
You're going to be a big storyline, obviously. And so, Jake, the one question I have for you, if, in fact, the Bengals are going to come out here and they're going to beat the Browns, what is the one thing they have to do today in order to secure that?
Oh, man. One thing? Let's see.
Multiple.
You sound like me. You sound like me talking about the Saints. Like, one thing, really?
What's the most important thing? There's a few things that I talk about like as weekly things that are important for the Bengals. One of those is game script. If they go down early, they have the kind of run defense that is just going to be in for a long day. Now, without Nick Chubb, that might be a little bit easier to contain. Kareem Hunt's still a very good football player, but not really the runner that Nick Chubb is. So the first thing that I talk about every week for this team is that they're not built to stop an offense when they're behind. And that could change, but they've been so dinged up on the defensive line. I think they've lost like 6 defensive tackles for either the whole season or a significant time. DJ Reader now out for the season, for example.
Right.
That becomes very difficult for them. The other thing is have a good game plan for Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett against Bobby Hart, not what you want to see if you're a Joe Burrow fan. But to Bobby Hart's credit, he is playing the best football of his career. Now that's a low bar, but it is worth saying that he is playing, below average starter level instead of decent backup level this year. So there's been some improvement there. So contain Myles Garrett and have a better game plan for Baker Mayfield. Like I said, the only team that Baker Mayfield's looked good this year against is the Cincinnati Bengals. And a lot of that is because he had time. Kevin Stefanski came out with a nice game plan on a short week, showed some things that they didn't show as much of in week 1. Now you've got 5 more weeks of tape on the Browns. You know what Baker likes. You know what makes him successful. So find a way to take those things away and make him be a drop back passer, if at all possible, because we know that's where he struggled this year. And try not to be a get right team. Let's just stop fixing other teams' problems.
I love it. Jake, thank you very much for coming through and joining us this morning here on Locked On NFL Sunday. Make sure that y'all throw Jake a follow on Twitter at Jake_NFL. You can catch him and his co-host James over at Locked On Bengals every Monday through Friday to keep you up to date with everything going on in the Who Dey Nation. Jake, we appreciate you coming through, man, and enjoy the game today, and best of luck.
Yeah, you guys enjoy the games today as well, and I'll talk to y'all soon.
Appreciate you, bud.
Take a look at this game too, Ross. Part of me is thinking I've seen the damage that Baker Mayfield has taken in the last 2 weeks. He's getting beat up, and his play hasn't been very good. If there's any time for the Bengals to sneak one on the Browns to get an upset, I feel like it is today. And I don't know if I picked them. I have to double check my my tally site picks on the year. But I think, if I'm not mistaken, I chose Cleveland. Never mind. But
still, you're right though. You're right. Like this is the one.
Cincinnati can do it. I feel like this is the game people should be circling for a potential upset outside of the Denver game. But outside of that, kind of going back to what we were talking about before we got to Jake, we brought up the Jaguars, and Preston Moore in the chat. Yes. There's some talk right now, according to Ian Rappaport, that there's a chance that the Jaguars could bench Gardner Minshew this week. And I mean, going through it, we talked with Tony not too long ago here on Locked On and NFL Sunday. And the one thing that stood out is that he's not playing great football for Jacksonville, but he's also not putting them in the worst position to succeed as well. Now he's got some struggles. He's got, the wild hair, the erratic interception here and there, but for the most part, he's played really, relatively efficient. What are your quick thoughts on Gardner Minshew? I don't even know who the Jaguars' backup quarterback is at this point.
That was my big thing. Is I was going like, if not Minshew, then who? Like that was my big thing. Was I don't understand sort of where you would turn otherwise if you decide to go away from Gardner Minshew. I feel like Gardner Minshew still gives this team the best chance to win. It looks like per the unofficial depth chart on the Jacksonville Jaguars website is that it's Jake Luton that you would turn to after. Yeah, exactly. That you would turn to. And Snoop Dogg has one question for everyone. who? Like, that's just not going to be, that's not where you go. So I think that, like, this is a team that has shown that it's still trying to win games. Like, they're not trying to tank or anything. And Gardner Minshew, of course, is trying to convince his team that he's the right guy. I don't see why you turn away from him at this point. I think he gives you the best chance to win.
Well, not only that, too, they thought Nick Foles was the guy. It was a one-year experiment. Then they went with Gardner Minshew. It's like, make up your mind. Are you either committed to Minshew mania or you're not? I mean,
right.
I think for Jaguars fans, they have a legitimate complaint about, look, let's develop a quarterback because the process that we have had for so long is not there. Jacksonville, guess what? Blake Bortles is on the Broncos practice squad. If you guys want him back, just take him.
Just take him. You can have him. I love it. All right, let's get to our next guest coming through, one of our local experts on the Philadelphia Eagles. It is a great pleasure to be joined by the homie, Gino Camilleri. I love the look in the back. I love the flag, man. He's got it going. You can follow him on Twitter at Gino_LOE. He and Louis do a great job keeping you up to date every Monday through Friday on the Philadelphia Eagles. Gino, how you doing, brother? How you holding up?
That's the thing. I'm just trying to work through it. I mean, but I've been a fan of this team for 20 years now, and this is not the worst that we've seen. And frankly, this is one of the better positions I've felt in this entire season after this 2-4-1 victory. Not because it was a world-beating effort by the Eagles at all, but it just continued to show the one principle that Doug Peterson has instilled in this team, and it's overcoming the adversity. And you look around the NFC East right now, Washington is just, they're in a complete jumble right now. I mean, they beat the Eagles, but I wouldn't put them at the top of the division. Same with the Giants. They're getting better, but I still think they're a year or two away from really competing. And then Dallas, they go out, have their biggest overcoming adversity moment against the Cardinals, and they just completely gave up in the second half. So you look at the Eagles, who have now done it for 4 years in a row, overcoming injury after injury, and now Carson Wentz only has him and Jason Kelsey healthy on the offense, and they have gone out there and put up some good efforts. And that's really not my concern is the offense. It's more the defense and the special teams and trying to get 3 units to click at once, because this team, like Doug Peterson says, it's not too far off. I mean, they have elite football players on this team. And that's the thing that I look at this team, and it's not a building team like the Redskins right now. It's not a building team like you guys were just talking about the Jaguars. Like, there's still a window for this team in terms of personnel, in terms of decision makers, in terms of coaching. It's just, can they get healthy and get right and get clicking on all 3 phases of the game at the same time? Because right now you're at the top of the division and you still have 4 more division games to play. So if you want to make a playoff run, I really think that you can, because you've done it 3 years in a row, and there's no reason to look at this team and tell me they can't do it again.
Yeah, I hear you. You know, it's funny. They get the win Thursday night. I was going to ask you a question about Daniel Jones, but I tripped up a little bit in my memory, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it over to Cody.
I don't think he got it, but that was
good. It's fine. It's fine. I did what I could. You know what I mean?
But Gino, one of the questions I have for you, I look at this Eagles football team, and you factor in all the injuries on the offensive line, and then you factor in the injuries at wide receiver. Well, now they're going to be losing Desean Jackson, who made his return, and they went to him early on that first series, and they got going on an end-around jet sweep. They also got him going in the passing game. Then he goes out with an injury, and what I felt like the second hit should have actually been called for a penalty as well. Should have been more enforceable. Now you lose a playmaker due to, I think, a very terrible decision by the officials not to protect Desean Jackson in that situation.
Right.
That to me stood out, and I was frustrated about that for Philadelphia fans. And every time I watch an Eagles game, I just can't help but think of Robert De Niro's character in Silver Linings Playbook. Just something's going wrong. He's freaking out. But outside of that, do you feel like, because when I watch Carson Wentz, I factor in the injuries on the offensive line, I factor in the wide receivers. Sometimes I feel like he's trying to do a little too much, and I certainly understand it, because offensively you're trying to get Doug Peterson. They've been going for it on 4th down this year. They're like, look, we just got to try. We got to keep building, and it goes to that overcoming part of adversity that you mentioned, and they did that because with about 4 minutes left, I believe they were down by 10 points, and they were able to cut it in, and now obviously they come out on top of the victory. What are your thoughts on Carson Wentz this year? Is he doing too much? Is he trying to do much? Where's the fine balance between trying to lead it as a quarterback and then doing too much? Because we saw a couple of bad throws from him as well.
Absolutely. And I'm always under the representation that I contextualize everything when I look at the NFL, because you have to. I mean, nothing is red and white, or black and white, rather. You're not comparing apples to oranges ever. And Carson Wentz right now, that's the big narrative. He's doing too much. And it always seems like there's something to put on Carson Wentz. There's always something wrong with Carson. He's one of those guys that he's either injury prone or he does too much. But the thing is, and I asked this question to Louis every time, would the Philadelphia Eagles be better off with 11 not on the field? And I cannot look you in the face and say that they would be better off, because you look at what he did in the final 6 minutes of that game, and what he did in the fourth quarter against Baltimore the week before, and what he did in the fourth quarter against Pittsburgh and San Francisco and the final 4 games of last year, with literally nobody around him. And yes, he does try to do too much, like that high school player that's so much better than everybody. They try to hold on to the ball. And that's been Carson's mentality since he was at North Dakota State. He's a never say die kind of guy. And that's the fine line that you walk, the tightrope that you walk. And yes, he's going to take some sacks sometimes, but then he's also going to have these extension plays where he gets out of a sack, looks down the right side of the field, sees John Hightower for 50 yards, and you're in a position to score a touchdown. So that's what you have to look at with Wentz. And I come from the scouting academy and the whole the ideology that Carson Wentz is a player you quote unquote win because of. And you win games because of Carson Wentz, and at the same time, you're going to lose games because of Carson Wentz. But when I look at the 3 units on this team, I say Carson and Doug and Jason Kelce, the 3 lone survivors on that offense, have done more than enough to instill confidence in my head. They've scored 25 points per week. It's their defense and special teams that's the thing. When Doug Peterson goes for it on 4th down, like you mentioned, in an opponent's territory and expects your defense to make a stop at the 2, and then that Giants offense goes down and scores a 98-yard touchdown, or you get the ball and you get it to the 30-yard line and your kicker misses a 31-yard field goal, what's the only unit that you can really trust? That's going to be your playmaker, your veteran quarterback, Carson Wentz. So to contextualize it all, remember that, yes, Carson Wentz tries to do too much, but I also think Doug, and you've seen that, trusts Carson Wentz way more than he does anybody else. Because if you look back to what he did with Nick Foles in that offense versus what he does with Carson Wentz, it's like a dog on and off the leash. Carson Wentz, you have the trust with him, but there's sometimes that dog may run and chase a squirrel, like we've seen. But at the same time, that dog may push you out of the way in front of a moving car and save your life. So that's what I've seen with Carson Wentz. And I'm not going to ever batter rip Carson Wentz because the national media does that too much. And I like to see the good. And man, if you saw that Boston Scott throw at the end of the game.
Oh yeah. Whew, that was a big boy throw. That was the best throw I've seen.
One of the better throws I've seen Carson Wentz make. And Next Gen Stats only had it at a 37% completion percentage. I think it was way harder of a throw than that, contextualizing the size of Boston Scott. He was under pressure that entire play. And those are the big boy throws you like to see. And with nobody. I mean, I'm here in Buffalo. I see Josh Allen on national TV go out there with John Brown, Stephon Diggs, his entire receiving corps, his entire offensive line, and lay an egg. And then I see Carson with basically a JUCO team around him go out there and beat a division opponent. So that's what inspires confidence in me with Carson Wentz.
I like it. You know, you and Louis had some really, really great feedback on Doug Peterson early on this season, and have been, really, I'll say sharp-tongued, but also kind of fair in the judgment of him and leading this offense. You made some references to him maybe trusting Carson Wentz too much sometimes. How are you starting to, now that we're a few games into the season, holding a first-place lead right now in the NFC East, what is right now your evaluation of Doug Peterson and what he's been able to bring to this team as their head coach?
Yeah, Doug loves to say that he self-scouts all the time. And frankly, I don't know how much he does, because there's a lot of these things that Lou and I have said, and more with Jim Schwartz than anything. But you could go back to 2 or 3 years ago and listen to the shows that we were talking about, saying this offense starts out slow. Their play designs are not up to snuff. Their execution is not up to snuff. And I think you really saw all 3 of those factors come into play on Thursday, because Doug Peterson, he makes some big boy decisions and some Philly special decisions that win you the Super Bowl. Then he also has these decisions where he's in the red zone, and he decides to run a play 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage that ends up getting you out of field goal range, or you're in the red zone and you have to have a 2-point conversion. And on 3 straight 2-point conversions going back to last week, you have Carson Wentz keep the ball. And he talks about his red zone plays were exhausted, and he always has an excuse to me for something when you're the most prepared coach in this division, frankly, because you've been there for 5 years and everybody else is in their first year. You have the continuity. You have the offensive minds now. Right. So to keep making these little excuses is very frustrating. But at the same time, the question I ask with Carson Wentz, I ask with Doug Peterson, and I frankly don't think this team would be better off without Doug Peterson. But I do think there are some adjustments that this team could make. Right. I look back to what Andy Reid did with Doug in his last year in Kansas City, where he allowed Doug to be the second half play caller. I think Doug is definitely a very good second half play caller. But in the first half, he definitely struggles, and he definitely struggles in some clock management, and he comes from the Andy Reid tree, so that's only going to be one of his factors. Right. But at the same time, I think bringing in somebody to maybe call the first half of plays, maybe bring in somebody from the college ranks that has a great intuitive offensive system that really fits Carson Wentz, because frankly, it's too boring right now. You know what the Eagles are going to do. It's not like Kansas City where you have the same play formation that you run 5, 6, 7 plays out of. Right. No, if you see a wide receiver coming across the field, you know it's going to be an end around. If you see the wide receiver flex out to the slot, you know it's going to be a look to the flat. Like, this team has been the same offensive called team for the last 3 years. And I look at the addition of Golden Tate at the trade deadline a couple of years ago, and even Jalen Hurts right now. This team struggles to incorporate very good offensive playmakers for some reason. And they need to figure that out, because the NFL isn't like the MLB or NBA where you have 162 or 81 games. You have 16 tries. And with no preseason this time around, I think this team should have been way more prepared than they were. They should be off to a better start than 2-4-1. But frankly, this team might be 6-1 if it isn't for some of the decisions that Doug made. So that's the balance. I always go back to the balance, and I always mention the one scene from Avengers Endgame with Thanos with the knife on his finger, saying you have to find the balance. And that's just, we've been so lopsided in Philadelphia for so many years that that seesaw is just sitting on one side where the bigger kid is, and we got to find that balance and find the defensive balance and the offensive play call balance, because yes, it seems so cliche, but this team is not far off. I really think that with the decision makers they have there, with the personnel they have there, you have a chance to make a run later on, and you want to get healthy in November and December, and that's when this team plays its best ball. So the first half evaluation, I give Doug like a C-, but this is when it counts. You're right, Ross. This is when it matters.
Well, there's one question I wanted to ask you too. We miss him in Denver. We think he's a phenomenal guy on and off field. His hometown is obviously from Philadelphia. Will Parks made his return on Thursday night after being on IR with a hamstring injury. Didn't really get to see too much of him. Obviously, I think that he's just trying to work his way back in. And obviously, with the package that the Eagles have on the field with the defensive backs, at that point, without all the reps, it was understandable to see why Will Parks wasn't as involved. He was. Evan Ingram got behind him with his speed and then dropped it. What do you project for Will Parks' fit in this defense, maybe going forward as he gets a little bit more acclimated?
So I definitely like what I saw out of Will Parks in this game, just from where they lined him up, because frankly, they haven't had that cover safety to rely on for quite some time. And I think even with the Evan Ingram drop, there's only so many times you can defend Ingram as a safety, because he's basically a wide receiver. Yeah, so, I mean, it goes without saying that, yes, sometimes you will get beat, but Will Parks, I mean, that's the type of football that I want to play. I want to have chess piece type players. I think, Ross, you see that Malcolm Jenkins went down to the Saints, but I think this Eagles team looked at Rodney McLeod and said, where Rodney is right now versus Malcolm in their career, I think Rodney McLeod can play all over the field, unlike Malcolm, who's got to play a little closer to the line of scrimmage. Same with a guy like Will Parks. This team likes to find these guys that they can move from corner to safety, bring them down to the box. A lot of these quarters coverage type ideologies. And I think Will Parks is definitely that guy. And I was very pleased by the addition of him. I think if he was healthy coming out of the gate, that he would be probably the second or third best defensive back player on this team right now, behind Rodney McLeod and Darius Slay, because frankly, he's one of those guys that this team was going to rely on. And Jim Schwartz said that coming into the year. And I really like what they did on the defensive side of the ball. Without those chunk plays, I think they did a decent job. Still some areas to clean up, but I think with the personnel getting healthy, if Avonte Maddox comes back next week and maybe they trade for a linebacker at the deadline, like I said, with an elite front four, with two very good players in Slay and McLeod on the back end, you just have to find a few more pieces to stick in there and get those gears to start cranking. And I really think Will Parks is quote unquote one of those gear guys that is going to make this thing click.
Boom. I love it. We miss Philly Will Endeavor for sure.
Absolutely. Great guy.
Gino, man, we appreciate you coming through and giving us the down low on the Philadelphia Eagles. Enjoy the day today, and congrats again on the Thursday night win, so you can relax a little bit here on a Sunday and not have to worry about it so much. Make sure that y'all follow Gino on Twitter at Gino_LOE. Catch himself and his co-host Louis DiBiase over at Locked On Eagles every single Monday through Friday, keeping you up to date on everything going on in Philly. Gino, we appreciate you, buddy.
Hey, thank you guys. Go Birds.
There you go. Have a good one, brother.
Philadelphia faithful, man. Yeah,
I love it. I love it, man.
Those guys are awesome. Gino and Louis, they're a good pair together.
They're so fun. They're a fun listen all the time. And like, I wanted to say too, like the Eagles fan base, the Bills fan base, the Saints, like there are some really good fan bases across the NFL. And I think the Eagles definitely rank near the top in terms of, fan bases across the NFL.
Yeah, no, they really do. But like I said, if I watch any Philadelphia Eagles game, I'm just thinking, what is Robert De Niro's character doing? What is Bradley Cooper's character doing? Are they still making parlay bets, all that stuff? And when I saw, Desean Jackson, that was a big topic in Silver Linings Playbook. So just when that happened to him, they got him back. It's just one of those things like, what's Robert De Niro's character saying right now about it?
I love it.
But, yeah, obviously, the Eagles, they get a little bit of rest. They can maybe get some guys back. But for Desean Jackson, he's going to be out multiple weeks. They say with a high ankle sprain, there's also some sort of fracture in that ankle.
Right.
Just an unfortunate play that should have never happened. And, it's just, yeah, I mean, it was a chippy game. I mean, those guys were getting feisty with one another, and it was about to boil over after that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I think that the Eagles, despite the fact, I mean, you look at the record of every team in that division, it is bottom ranked across the NFL for the most part. I mean, they're really within a game of each other. Like that's how crazy it is.
Yeah.
There's 4 teams within a game of each other for that top spot there. So it's going to be interesting to see how they do it. But I think obviously with Dak Prescott's injury in Dallas, the Eagles become the favorite to win that division right now. But definitely. I mean, all these other teams are not too far behind them.
Yeah. We'll see exactly how it unfolds. The NFC East being a tough division based upon struggling teams, usually over a cross, or not necessarily a cross, but just a 90-degree turn of the compass, and then you're down in the NFC South, and that's where we're headed to next with Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons joining us. Aaron, we appreciate you coming through. Y'all can follow Aaron on Twitter at FalcFans, and you can catch him every Monday through Friday on the Locked On Falcons podcast. One of my favorite listens from across the network. He's outstanding. Aaron, we appreciate you coming through, buddy. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm glad that you guys are decided we're going to get all the bad teams out of the way this weekend.
That's the second week in a row.
Falcons. So, I like, last but not least, the Falcons are on deck. So I'm glad to be
here. Certainly not least. I mean, look, the Falcons finally make the decision to move on from head coach Dan Quinn. The GM's on the way out, a couple of position coaches on the way out. This team ends up going out and getting a win last week against another kind of hapless team, but still a win nonetheless under interim head coach Raheem Morris, who I'm personally a big fan of. What is it about this team, or what was it about this team this last weekend where they came in and played for this new head coach at sort of at an inspired level that we haven't necessarily seen yet so far this season?
Yeah, I think the firing Dan Quinn was kind of a shot across the bow. For the last year, the team and players have maintained that they were playing hard for Dan Quinn. The evidence was it wasn't a drop in effort.
Right.
Last year, it wasn't a drop in effort. This year, it was just they weren't simply executing. And it seems like Raheem Morris changed some things up in practice in the week leading up to last week's win against the Vikings, and really got this team playing with a sense of urgency that they just really hadn't played with in the 5 previous weeks when they were winless under Dan Quinn.
Yeah.
Bright spots all around. I mean, when you still look at this offense, despite some of the struggles that Atlanta has had this season, they've got Julio Jones back, who played a little bit of a prank on everybody last week after the game, acting like he was being carried out, and then he started walking. You got to love stuff like that. But they just played with a different attitude. They just came out and smacked Minnesota in the mouth, and so they got the mentality to maybe compete and to turn some things around a little bit. But in your opinion, when you look at this Falcons offense, I know the Broncos play them in 3 weeks. It's a big matchup I'm looking at. What do you think has been the biggest key for their success or non-success in consistency overall this season? I think you can make the argument without Julio Jones. Yeah, that was a big thing. But Calvin Ridley's been phenomenal this season. What is it about this Falcons offense that you feel like gives Falcons fans hope the rest of the way?
Yeah, on paper, their offense checks the boxes that you want to see. You have Todd Gurley. He's not putting, he's been productive. He's not like a monster, the Todd Gurley we knew of old, but he's been effective running the football. Obviously, when Julio's in the lineup, it really changes the dynamic. I think the big thing that Julio brings to the table is the explosiveness in the offense. Like, they're getting some of those explosive plays from Calvin Ridley, but his value as far as those vertical and intermediate plays comes more from having Julio draw the bracket coverage and Ridley getting those one-on-ones that he can really exploit. And in those 3 games where he was primarily the number one with Julio out of the lineup, he wasn't able to generate those same level of explosive plays. So it feels like the Falcons offense just is clicking on all cylinders when Julio's in the lineup, and their offensive line's been better. As I said, the running game has been improved. It's not amazing, but it's been solid. They have 2 valuable weapons in Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley, 2 of the more productive receivers in the league. So it's very clear that they have all the right ingredients. Just for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to be firing on all cylinders on a consistent basis. And I think a lot of that has been owed to some slow starts throughout the season. And when they don't have that explosive element, they can't really play from behind. But this past week against Minnesota, they were able to get out to a fast start. I think that's going to be a key for them this today against the Lions. If they can get off to a fast start, I think things work in their favor. But if they get off to a slow start, that's going to be a problem for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. And so, we look at the offensive side when it comes to the Falcons. That's something you can almost always rely on in terms of the production coming from Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, those weapons over there. But you have to look over at the defensive side with this team as well. 2 big names on injured reserve right now, the newly signed Darqueze Dennard, as well as DeMonte Casey, who's been an outstanding player for them, or really, I guess I'll say an outstanding player in terms of his development for them so far. What are Kendall Sheffield dealing with an injury, but still looks to be fine going into this game. How is the secondary shaping up? We know that this defense has been ransacked by injuries before in the past. What are we seeing in that realm so far for this Falcons defense this year?
There are some bright spots, but the bar is set pretty low given some of the struggles that they've had on defense. AJ Terrell, the rookie corner, has looked pretty good. Darqueze Dennard, prior to his injury in week 3 against the Bears, looked like kind of their best corner.
Yeah.
So that's a big blow. Hopefully they're going to get him back soon. Raheem Morris talked earlier this week about he's coming back soon. He didn't, he's on IR, so maybe he'll be there back for that Broncos game. At this point in time, that's kind of the hope right now. Losing Casey was a significant blow, but he hadn't really been playing all that well. Their safeties really haven't played at all this year. Keanu Neal coming back from the Achilles tear and the ACL tear that sidelined him the last 2 seasons just doesn't look like the same player, particularly in coverage. In run support, he's still effective in that role, but in coverage, he's not bringing the same thing. Their other cornerback spot, Isaiah Oliver, Kendall Sheffield. Sheffield's been a nice addition these last couple of weeks, and I think it's been a reason why their defense has played a little bit better. Oliver's struggled a lot. Basically, if you just watch any highlight reel, you're going to see Oliver getting beat for big plays this season when it comes to the Falcons. So it feels like they're a work in progress, but if they can get Dennard back, Terrell back, if their safety play can upgrade and improve, and Sheffield continues his development, I think their secondary can be fine. They're not going to be good, but it can just be fine that if all the other things are clicking for them, their front 7 and their offense, then the secondary can be quote unquote good enough for them to potentially maybe at least be a lot more competitive than they've been the last couple of games this year.
Sure. That sounds very familiar to a team that I cover. I don't know why, but
Well, yeah, Aaron, the one thing I have for you, we look at where the Falcons are at right now, 1-5, bottom of the NFC South right now. Very tough division overall. Carolina's playing good. New Orleans is playing decently good football, up and down a little bit. And then you have Tampa Bay right now, who just seems to have reloaded with Antonio Brown. Where do you see Atlanta in this division? Can they make a little bit of a push at the mid part, maybe the end part of the season, or maybe they can rise up a little bit? I mean, I just used the
I love it. I love it.
I didn't even intend to, but I mean, there we go. What are your thoughts on that?
I think they're stuck in last place unless one of those teams really struggles. I think the Falcons are kind of shooting for like 5 to 6 wins max this year, and it seems like all those other teams should at least get to 7 or more wins this year. So it feels like they're stuck in the cellar, but maybe they can play spoiler. They've been known to beat a Saints team coming out of their bye week, which they will face in week 11. They got the Carolina Panthers on Thursday, can throw a wrench into that. Tampa Bay, even before the Antonio Brown signing, I wasn't necessarily too high on their ability to beat them, but you never know. Maybe the Bucs at that point in time will be like 9-2 or 10-2 or something like that. Overlook the Falcons, and similar to what the Saints did last year, and the Falcons could sort of catch them off guard a little bit. So I think really at this point they're just trying to throw a wrench into all these teams' playoff seedings, wild card race, the divisional race. But as far as them really making a significant run, the back half of their schedule is just so tough. They got New Orleans twice, they got Tampa Bay twice, they got Kansas City, they got the Raiders, they got the Chargers. There's maybe a couple of wins in there, but for the most part, all their wins are probably going to come. The majority of them are going to come these next couple of games against Detroit, Carolina, and Denver if they're going to win any games. So I think they're sort of stuck at the 4th place spot, but certainly can play some spoiler for some teams coming up.
Yeah. Before we get you out of here, and I got to ask you one fun question. Are you to the point yet to where you're doing mock drafts?
I did do one this week. So yeah, technically, yes. Yeah.
That's my favorite part of the season, when the team's like done and you're like, all right, it's mock draft time. Here we go.
I refuse to do them on a daily basis, but
of course,
I will probably crank out a couple before the end of the season, So
I love it. I love it. Speaking of a daily basis, make sure y'all follow Aaron on Twitter at FalcFans and catch the podcast Locked on Falcons on a daily basis every Monday through Friday. I'm telling y'all, he's one of the best listens that we have. Fantastic, analytical, great opinions, clear takes, everything checks the boxes. Aaron, we appreciate you for coming through, man. Enjoy the game today against Detroit. Hopefully you get that win that you're looking for, and then maybe you could skip a mock draft this coming week and just focus on the win.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely, buddy. Take care.
Always love having Aaron on, man. Aaron is as
oh yeah, he'll be back.
Yeah. Oh, he will be back. I was watching the Terminator yesterday too, and of course, but yeah, even like the little pun with the rise up, I didn't even intend that. That was just something that just came naturally. I guess
it's just what happened when you talk to Aaron. Like you get better. You know what I'm saying? And so like it just inherently you start making those references, those puns, those things you didn't even know you had the ability to do, and bam, there it is.
Aaron's got it going on, but Ross, let's get to one of our favorite parts of the day of Locked On NFL Sunday here every Sunday on Periscope, on YouTube, on the book face. We are everywhere. We are here for you, but let's get into some of our picks we're going to be getting into today.
Absolutely. We'll start off with one of the, I think the headliner really in the early afternoon game. 2-1 here in the AFC, the Pittsburgh Steelers hosting the Tennessee Titans, traveling to the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee Titans favored -1.5. So this is a little bit of home field advantage, line for Tennessee. This is going to be a really, really good game. I mean, Pittsburgh has been outstanding since coming back. They did lose Devin Bush over on the defensive side, and Tennessee has been working without some of those wide receivers every here and then. But still, both very, very good teams. Where are you leaning for this one? I think this is going to be a really fun game.
This was a tough one for me. You know what? Looking at both these undefeated teams sitting out at 5-0, I thought the biggest question for me is, who's going to be able to stop the run? And ideally, when I look at Devin Bush being out for Pittsburgh, I think it's a big blow to them defensively. Bush was an intricate part of their defense. They're still very good defensively. But I do think that with the style of football that we see with Tennessee, the run, play action, catch you off guard, I think Tennessee has the favor in this matchup. And also, I mean, you're not going to have Deontay Johnson for the Pittsburgh Steelers, though Chase Claypool has emerged as one of those big play guys, being one of the leading receivers on the team in terms of touchdowns. Obviously, Juju Smith-Schuster, good as always. And then James Conner out of the backfield at the running back position. I do think that it kind of leans in favor, though, of Tennessee, and this is going to be at Tennessee. So ideally, Tennessee's had 3 home games in a row. It's crazy. And the win that they had last week, Mike Vrabel is very, very smart, understands the rule book to an extension that I don't think anybody else really does. The fact that they decided to take that penalty to stop the clock, I mean, that right there, you didn't think about that. Like when you're watching the game, you're like, why are they doing that? Ideally, Vrabel's smart, and that Tennessee football team, they're tough. They're good, and I got them taking this one against Pittsburgh.
I like the pick. I like the reasoning, but I'm going to go ahead and take the Steelers, man. I'm going to be contrarian here. I'm glad that you brought up Mike Vrabel because we also have Mike Tomlin. These 2 coaches, they're at the top of my list when it comes to coach of the year so far through 2020. And so I love getting the opportunity to watch these guys match up. Mike Tomlin, a classic, good, outstanding head coach. Mike Vrabel bringing in, some of this, just his understanding of the rule book and everything that he does as well. And then, you're looking at, and this was something Luke Braun, he and I co-host Locked On NFL on Tuesdays. He's the host of Locked On Vikings as well, which you can also catch every Monday through Friday. Luke talked about how, you look at these rosters, what teams are outperforming their roster, and Tennessee feels like that team. Yeah. But for this game, I'm going to stick with Pittsburgh. And the reason why is because I feel like Pittsburgh can, despite what it is that Tennessee usually does to set up success in the passing game, I feel like Pittsburgh can limit them in the passing game with their back end and with their pass rush. And so because of that, I lean a little bit more towards Pittsburgh because the run game, unless you're busting out those 94-yard runs every single time, you're not putting up as many points on the board as you're going to see Pittsburgh put up with their success in the passing game and being a little bit more balanced over on offense. And so if you're going to be able to take away the passing game and then make another team one-dimensional by keeping them on the ground, I think that's a good approach for your defense. So I'm going to take Pittsburgh for this one just because I feel like they can be more multiple on offense and therefore put up more points in this game.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, this is going to be one of the games of the week to watch.
Oh, yeah.
Certainly. So, yeah. No, I mean, I like the contrarian taking. And obviously, we're going to compare and contrast on next Sunday's Locked On NFL live when we discuss, too. We'll pull up where we're at with our picks according to tally side on the season. So, it's going to be fun in comparison. But, yeah, I mean, I think that is going to be the game of the week, and I think fans are going to be really excited.
Yeah, I'm kind of disappointed that this game actually happens at the same time as the Saints game because I really want to see this game. But, hey, look, I got to do my job. Let's move on to the next one here. Also in the early portion, NFC East. I picked this one because it's really tight and it's really interesting. The Dallas Cowboys traveling to take on the Washington football team. And 2 weeks ago, I would have never imagined that in this game, Washington would be favored -1 even at home, but this is the Dak Prescott effect. This is the injury effect here. Dallas coming in with their second game with Andy Dalton. They did not look good last week with that offense. That defense has not looked good at all so far this season. Could this be a game for Washington to maybe end up pushing themselves into the 2-win category, which could put them in contention for really second and first place here as they move ahead?
Depends on which Washington football team shows up. If it's the Washington football team that showed up against the Philadelphia Eagles, and I think that the Washington could come out on top in this one. But Kyle Allen is playing very uninspiring at the quarterback position. Honestly, to be frank with you at this point, I know Ron Rivera is not the quarterback that he drafted. It's not the quarterback he worked with. Obviously, we saw that. That's why he traded after he was the head coach for Washington. That's why they traded for Kyle Allen. But Kyle Allen isn't cutting it to me. I think the Washington football team would be better off at this point with Alex Smith or Dwayne Haskins. But Dwayne Haskins not an option. More than likely going to be inactive today. I mean, he was doing the pregame stretching with the trainer on the side. So usually when you do that workout group, that's part of the people who are inactive. So look, I think we may see Alex Smith today. And I think it's going to be a bold prediction. We're going to see Alex Smith. He's going to take over. And look, Dallas, they just looked very, very abysmal against the Arizona Cardinals, who, they're an up and down team as well in Arizona. Right. And they had a really hard time just stopping the speed and explosiveness. I don't think Washington has speed and explosiveness necessarily. I know Terry McLaurin is one of those wide receivers you have to really account for, but he's really just it. So It's really hard. I mean, this could be a game that ends in a tie potentially. I mean, I really don't know at this point.
Could you imagine
where to go
my
for
goodness.
it? In the NFC East, for that matter, too, where you look at all the records of the 4 teams, they're within a game of each other, and I think another tie would put them on par with just how the division is playing as a whole this season. So I'm gonna go with Dallas in this one. I think Dallas is gonna win, but I do think we're gonna see Alex Smith, and then I think we could see Smith the rest of the way. But Kyle Allen playing uninspired football.
Yeah, absolutely. I wish that they would just believe in Dwayne Haskins and just give the kid a chance. Like it's so wild to me. But hey, you know what? It is what it is. He's somebody I would love to see get moved at the trade deadline, just so that maybe he gets an opportunity somewhere.
There's a team out there.
Somebody will need him. I'm going to take Dallas here as well. I agree. I just think that if you're asking me to choose between Kyle Allen and Andy Dalton, I'm still going to lean more toward Andy Dalton. You talk about a guy who's won games in the NFL, who has been a starting quarterback in the NFL, who has more weapons around him in terms of variety. If Ezekiel Elliott could just stop fumbling the ball, then maybe they can retain some of these possessions as opposed to giving up red zone possessions early on in drives. Yeah. I just look at those mistakes to maybe go away here, even against the road, or even on the road. Maybe a little bit more Tony Pollard in this offense might be helpful. But I just think that with Dallas's weapons and with the lack of weapons for Washington, I'll lean with Dallas. But I am looking forward to seeing this game because I do think that it is, if nothing else, it'll be an entertaining one. Like I'm excited to see, for instance, the Washington front seven or Washington pass rush against the Dallas offensive line, which has dealt with some injuries so far this season. So I'll take Dallas here with you.
Boom. And also, too, football fans, if you want to be able to watch these games that we're talking about, even after the fact, go to NFL.com/Game Pass and start your free 7-day trial to see if it's something that you would be interested in as well. You can catch it all in 45 minutes with condensed games. You also get the All-22 film 24 hours after the game is there. So check that out if you haven't already invested in NFL Game Pass as is.
Love it. I do love me some Game Pass.
Me too.
Not gonna lie about
film
that.
Is the way of life.
It really is.
Matchup, Ross, let me start things off with this matchup too. You got Tampa Bay after a big time victory over Green Bay last week. They look very good right now. They're heading to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders, who have beat the Kansas City Chiefs this year. They have played teams very tough. They're a different football team this year under John Gruden, and they got the pieces around, I think, that can make things work. However, the question is the offensive line. They had to quarantine for a little bit. Didn't get a chance to practice. They got placed on that COVID reserve list because they came in contact with Trent Brown. But they're all good to go for this matchup here. How do you see this game going? I'm going to give my quick pick. I think that Tampa Bay is going to roll in this one. I think it's going to be a 2-score game.
Yeah, I just think that, there was a time early on in the week to where I thought, maybe Las Vegas can pile on another upset here. They've done it twice already this season when they were hosting New Orleans, the game against Kansas City that you referenced. Maybe this is another opportunity for them to just kind of shock the world and get another one of these upsets. But then the offensive line ends up getting quarantined. You don't get any practice for those guys. And I think that that's huge. So it kind of makes me reverse course a little bit. I think Tampa Bay's defense should give, I almost said Oakland, Las Vegas's offense a ton of problems. The pass rush, the coverage, the secondary has gotten much better. Jamel Dean's looked really good. Carlton Davis has looked really good. Antoine Winfield getting closer and closer to that first career interception in his rookie year. But even without the interceptions, exactly, he's been all over the field. And then, of course, that second level has been very good. Look, Tom Brady's looked great. I'm not going to lie. I mean, he had the what down is it, third down, fourth down moment. He's had a couple of interceptions here and there. But the guys, he's got the weapons and he's been able to make good on them. It's hard for me not to take Tampa Bay here, and I won't risk it. I'll go with Tampa Bay. I was really looking at Las Vegas as maybe potentially getting the upset here just based upon their track record so far this season. But at this point, with the offensive line matter that you talked about, I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, it's a little worrisome, I think, when you look at this matchup. But, I think Vegas is tough. And look, that AFC West gets even tougher, and the NFC South gets tougher for the onset as well. But getting into the game that was shifted from the afternoon to primetime Sunday Night Football, the Seattle Seahawks coming off the bye at the Arizona Cardinals. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think this is going to be a great game. I love NFC West divisional games. They never disappoint. They're always good. And Seattle in prime time, it's always coming down to the wire. they're always a ton of fun to watch. So I'm really looking forward to this game. Seattle's favored right now, -3.5 by 3.5 points, even though they're visiting Arizona. I tend to lean a little bit more here to Seattle. They've just been outstanding. I think their defense, of course, has had struggles, but if you're going to give me Kyler Murray versus Russell Wilson, first of all, I'll take it. But secondly, I'm going to lean a little bit more over to Russell Wilson and his weapons. But I'm looking forward to seeing this game. This game, to me, comes down to which defense gets, and this is going to sound really cliche, but it's going to sound, to me, it comes down to which defense gets the key stop. It's going to be some defensive play that ends up changing the tide of this game and makes the big difference for me.
Yeah, no, I agree with you too. And there was a discussion in the Denver media this week where somebody tried referencing that Vance Joseph's defense was great. It's not that great when you look at the opponents that they have played, and I think the Seattle Seahawks are going to prove that today, and I think they're going to put up a lot of points. Like you said, the biggest thing, Seattle's defense has not been great at all, but the fact that Seattle is undefeated right now, all circumstances considered, the way that they've won games, it's Russell Wilson. Wilson right now currently on pace to break Peyton Manning's touchdown record in a season of 55 if he continues at the pace that he's at right now. So Russ dangerous for a reason. You know, I've learned not to bet against Russell Wilson, and I'm not going to do it this week. And especially for them being inside a dome, I think that they're gonna roll. I think it's going to be Seattle by a few touchdowns here.
Yeah, absolutely. Russell Wilson, by the way, I don't know about you, but he's my MVP so far.
Easily.
This season. I think there's a great conversation we have between him and Aaron Rodgers. But for me right now, especially after the performance last week by Green Bay, Russell Wilson is a clear front runner for me at this point.
Yeah, it's not even close. And Ross, you know, speaking of MVPs, man, I appreciate you and also the listeners here of Locked On NFL Sunday Live, when we are just breaking it down every game, the best pregame show that you can get, because we will talk about every team, unlike the national media. So with that said, make sure that you make yourself cozy with us on Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern time, also 9 a.m. Mountain time for those of you who are in the Rockies like me. Got some snow anticipated for the Broncos and the Chiefs game today. Ross, you know, let's get into our Monday night game, though, because this is also an interesting matchup because, I mean, looking at it, coming off of a loss last week against San Francisco, the Los Angeles Rams are in a little bit of a state of affairs here. When you look at Chicago, a team that beat Tampa Bay, this is a matchup that I don't know really how to pick. I mean, it is in LA, but they are so inconsistent. And we've talked about this ad nauseum in terms of once Sean McVay gets figured out a little bit, he still does the same stuff. He's got this tendency to do the same stuff until it tries to work, but we haven't seen that happen. And San Francisco, despite how bad they've been defensively this year, they took advantage of that. And look, Chicago's defense isn't a slouch. They have one of the best passing secondaries in the National Football League, and they are playing really good football around Jalen Johnson, Kyle Fuller, and then the back end of that secondary. Then you have Khalil Mack as an outside backer still coming after you. Chuck Pagano's defense is pretty dang good. I think this is going to be a game where Chicago is going to take this one on the road against LA.
Yeah, I know LA's a heavy favorite here, -6 at home. I get it. I understand. But I got to go Chicago here. Chicago's a really interesting team because of the fact that they've been, you know, they're 5-1, but I think we still talk about them as if they're 1-5. You know, I don't feel like we give them the credit that they deserve, but they've played really well. And Los Angeles' defense, particularly in the secondary, hasn't been the strongest. And we know that, you know, look, Chicago with Nick Foles, they're not afraid to throw the ball. They don't have this big time, you know, prolific pass offense or run offense or offense at all for that matter. But that defense keeps it so that, look, you score 20 points, you win a game if you're Chicago, you know, and that's what I feel like this game is going to look like, to where it's going to be a low scoring affair. The team that scores 20 points wins. I'm looking forward to this matchup a lot. I'm so glad that you shouted out Jalen Johnson, because I feel like a broken record sometimes, but the guy's just been outstanding coming out of Utah, starting corner there. He struggled a little bit in their last game against Carolina, but still did enough. Kyle Fuller's look great. Eddie Jackson's look great. I think this is the first time all season that I'm actually picking Chicago. That's how disrespectful I've been. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to take Chicago here. We're not differing too much on these picks, but I know we differed on some key picks that we'll review next week when we look at our tally site picks for the entirety of week 7. But man, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to this week of football. This weekend of football is going to be a ton of fun. I'm going to be focused, of course, in the early games on the New Orleans Saints. Are going to be without Michael Thomas, without Emmanuel Sanders, the Carolina Panthers, who they'll be hosting without Rasul Douglas, who's been their most consistent corner. Dante Jackson has been, on the injury report, questionable. He will play. So I'll be really interested to see how this game works. The Saints got absolutely gobsmacked last year coming off of the bye week. Can they get back to their winning ways off the bye? What is one of the other storylines that we haven't discussed today that you're really looking forward to watching so far over this week of NFL action?
Well, to me, it's really tough to pinpoint. I mean, Seattle coming off the bye, they're strong. They're a little bit reloaded here. You look at Denver hosting Kansas City coming off of a short week altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Part of me feels like Denver could sneak a little bit, maybe an upset over Kansas City. Really interesting to see how they game plan for it in the snow. But the Broncos defensively, they get AJ Boye back, their number one cornerback this week.
Yep.
And against a passing attack like Kansas City, you got to have those guys there. To me is can the Broncos sneak an upset over Kansas City? I hate to pick the Broncos angle here because I host Locked On Broncos, but
it's all right.
Me in the afternoon, that's the game I'm looking at. I just think Tampa Bay is going to roll over Vegas, and I think the Sunday night game is entertaining as always. For me, that's one thing I was going to take a look at there. But the storyline I think everyone's talking about, and we're not going to get to it this week. We'll get to it next week. Tua Tagovailoa, his debut is going to be with the Miami Dolphins, and that's going to be a big, big portion of what we talk about next Sunday once we're here. Locked On NFL Sunday, everywhere you get it on Periscope, YouTube, the Book Face, Twitch. We are everywhere. And make sure that you stay locked in and locked on to what Ross and I got going on here, Locked On NFL Sunday. Plus, follow all the local experts that we have here on the show as well. They do a great job bringing you NFL content coverage and analysis all across the Locked On NFL network.
Looking forward to it. We will see y'all next week. Cody, you have the catchphrase of catchphrases for us as we always wrap up our episodes. But I want to say real quick, absolute pleasure as always being here with you, doing this every Sunday morning. And as Cody said, continue to come through, continue to support, and we appreciate y'all because we'll be here every Sunday morning. Cody, take us out, man.
Well, like I said, I don't even know how to top that right there, Ross. But we got Brian Peacock checking in as well, host of Locked On 49ers, also part of the Peacock and Williamson show on your favorite podcast. But ladies and gentlemen, you can catch every single Locked On NFL podcast every single day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcast provider. Great content, great coverage all across the NFL with the local experts on the biggest stories. Locked On NFL.